What a pleasure to see you, Edwin.
It's really nice to see you, John.
This is an official interrogation.
It's
On behalf,
a sec check.
yes, a security check. And let me introduce you to say that you are actually an incredibly famous human being, well known to the multitudes for something or other. It'll come back to me. You used to play the drums with 1 minute silence, didn't you?
Yeah.
Admit it.
Yes, it was at least 17 years ago.
It was a very, very long time ago. I can remember.
Yeah.
I can remember the band forming back in what, 96, 97?
Yeah, a tail end of 96.
And it was meant to be a near-death experience then.
Yeah.
But nobody's actually dead yet. So
nobody's even near dead.
Yeah.
Nobody's anywhere near.
Yeah, so that was false advertising. But as 1 minute silence, you toured the world. You played in the US. You played in Japan.
Yeah.
Made 3 albums. I saw you 5 times, which were all really great. I saw you with NEWODISEASE as well after that.
Yeah.
When
nobody came.
No, well, I did. But
yeah.
And you had a lovely new black drum kit, which was nice.
Yeah, it was great, that kit. Really liked that drum kit.
Yeah.
I was depressed when my sponsor phoned up and said, we're going to get you playing Maple this year. And I thought, great. And he said, what colour do you want it? What sort of finish? And I said, matte black, because I was depressed.
Yes.
I went, everything matte black, all the hardware matte black.
Yeah.
Just so that it disappears at the back of the stage.
It did. I've never seen a kit that actually had black hardware and black, so it was like a black hole with you in the middle of it.
Mm.
Oh.
Yeah,
it's like that sometimes.
The ultimate goth drum kit.
Yeah, you should have got the piercings and then it would all been good. Oh dear. So the reason that we met, which was in 1996, is that you sent me an 11-page letter, handwritten scrawl, very, very nice scrawl, I must say, about your experiences in a certain group. And because the letter was hilarious, I responded to it. And by return of post, I got a 20-page letter that's on the outside of the envelope said, "Beware, contains live wildebeest." And so I've never opened that one. Just in case,
It is actually a live wildebeest.
Yeah.
I did actually send you it.
Yeah.
In the post.
It's incredible, isn't it? The things you get to. But you'd had a great fun experience in Scientology, which is why you wrote to me.
Yeah.
And, I wondered if you'd bedevil us with some of the details of, how you got involved and all of that stuff. If it's not too depressing,
Yes. Well, one of my friends said, "I bought this book called Dianetics, and I want to see if it works." Because it's really a really simple therapy technique. He said, "Oh, let's see if it works." So I said, "Right, I need to buy that book then and read it." Who sells it? So I phoned up the org.
The org.
The Scientology Centre. And I said, "Do you sell Dianetics?" And they said, "Oh, yes." I said, "I need to come and buy it then." So I went into the org and bought a copy of Dianetics.
Which org was it? Was it
Birmingham?
Yeah, that's where I started. When it was back in the old days, we were a mission, not an org.
Was that in Moseley?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Moseley.
because this was in Hurst Street, just south of the Bullring.
Yeah, it was on the Alcester Road. Yeah, so the new sort of modern org, not the old traditional org that I went to. What year was that? Whenabouts was that?
Well, that was before the internet, so before I could look something up and realise it's a con.
So before 93, so before the World Wide Web.
Yeah, it was sort of 89, 88, 89.
Yeah.
Because I'd read this book and I'd actually spent about 4 hours in the registrar's office while I was buying this book. I was just chatting with him, and he was making it out that the group was great because in Division 2, which was his division, as a registrar, a salesman, so he's disseminated Scientology to me for 4 hours. And he also tells me that the people in Division 2 get to drink the most beer. And I thought, well, that's the one for me then. I'm drinking lots of beer.
Yeah.
And we went out and drank loads of beer. Being the registrar. And I didn't bat an eyelid at the time, but in retrospect, it's kind of weird. It's like David Berg's sect. You know, it's a sort of a flirty fishing type thing.
Yeah,
I'll take this guy down the pub.
Yeah.
Yeah, what does he like? He likes booze, right? I'll take him down the pub and get a booze.
It's a good job you didn't say you liked herrings.
Herons.
No, herrings, not herons. That would just be wrong, you know.
Yeah. Herrings.
Yeah. My dad liked herrings. Not in that way, obviously, you know, but...
Yeah.
No.
I don't like herrings. I think they're a terrible fish.
Yeah. They're unpleasant to their neighbours and, you know.
They're not very sociable.
They're bony.
They've got all those bones.
Yeah.
That's really difficult. Makes it difficult to eat them.
Yeah, and the Dutch roll them up into what they call roll mops.
Or they're quite nice.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? You take the bones out, they're quite nice.
Oddly.
Maybe I wonder if that's true of people. Do you think? Take the bones out, they might be quite nice.
Yeah.
If a bit invertebrate along the way. You know.
A boneless person.
Spineless. Like a spineless yucca. I told my friend he got a spineless yucca, and he was, how dare you? You know, my yucca plant is very brave. You know, Spanish bayonet, they call them as well. But all right, anyway. So you went down the pub, you drank a lot of beer, that appealed to you, and
yeah. And the certainty was sort of, that was really a bit appealing because this guy knew everything. And I thought, oh, bloody hell, I can know everything too. And very quickly, I knew everything within a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I was absolutely certain.
Yeah.
And I knew exactly what to do in any situation.
Well, as Ron Hubbard said, knowledge is certainty. So,
yeah.
And I kind of went, are you sure of that? You know, it's kind of, but apparently it is.
Yeah, which is kind of an ironic sort of take on knowledge is certainty.
Well, I immediately I saw that, kind of went, actually understanding that you don't know is is a lot better, and being certain. I am certain of that, you know, at least. But
yeah, that's a Socratic thing.
Yeah, Socrates.
Yeah, that lad. So yeah, I became very certain because I enjoyed having a drink with this bloke, and a couple of days later he ended up coming back to my house, and according to my partner at the time, he weed on the sofa because he got so drunk. This registrar pissed on the sofa. She was absolutely livid.
Oddly,
she grabbed his trousers. They were sort of sitting in a heap. And she threw them in the bath, put loads of water on them, so he had
wet trousers.
Soaking wet trousers when he woke up with a hangover. But yeah, that is not on policy. It's not an on policy way to recruit people.
I haven't read that one, no, but you do find their reality, you know, don't you?
Yeah.
Let's do that. If your reality was you wanted to go down the pub, then fair enough.
Yeah, and he was a fan of Jim Beam and that kind of thing. And I hadn't drunk Jim Beam before, and I thought, oh, great, he's a fan of Jim Beam. He really likes it, and he's got empty bottles in his flat and stuff. Jim Beam. Oh yeah, I'm going to turn them all into candles. Load of Jim Beam bottles. But I thought, oh yeah, Jim Beam, I could try some of that. Years ago on that Jim Beam, so he shared a bottle of whiskey. And he talked more about the cult and about, he went into the whole track. That was fascinating. It didn't make me run away. It made me go, how do you know that? How is that something that you've experienced? All this whole track stuff about being an alien and mucking about in spaceships and you know, all that nonsense. And I thought it was fascinating.
Yeah.
And that's what I was looking for in session. I wasn't looking for the ability to communicate with anybody on any subject. I didn't give a shit. I wanted to know what happened 35 million years ago, you know.
Don't we all want to know that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Puzzled me for a long time.
But the trouble is that when you've got a science fiction writer like L. Ron Hubbard, who's writing all that whole track stuff, because he's not a very good sci-fi writer, all this space opera reality is not very good.
Yeah, it's a point, isn't it? You know, if Heinlein had actually done Scientology, we would have been able to grok the fullness of it, wouldn't we?
Yeah, it would have been a lot more interesting instead of the Helitrobus implants and the Fifth Invader Force and all of these
people really, with big hands. Yeah.
Yeah, the really dull sci-fi. It's dreadful.
It is. Now you come to mention it, I can't think why I was ever involved in it, because though Stephen King said that the short story Fear by L. Ron Hubbard was the greatest story ever written, but I'm pretty sure he hadn't read Maupassant or Chekhov.
Yeah.
So I think he'd probably change his mind if he read a bit of Chekhov or something.
Yeah. Yeah. But no, I read Fear and I thought it was dull, but then I thought all of his sci-fi was dull. Battlefield Earth was absolutely horrible. What a horrible book.
Yeah.
Oh, and Mission Earth is just a disaster.
Mitt Romney said that Battlefield Earth was his favourite book.
Really?
Yeah.
Mitt Romney.
Yeah. Well, he is also a Mormon, of course.
He's a Mormon, of course.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, are we allowed to say that about people? He's a Mormon.
He's a Mormon. That's why he likes Battlefield Earth, because he's a Mormon.
Yeah. Yeah. He likes the Angel Moroni and the Book of Moron.
They've got some weird beliefs there.
I was told when the Los Angeles Times in June of 1990 they published 5 major articles, and I'd spent 5 years working on these things, and the reason it took 5 years was because Wellcott and Sapel, who did it, were told, quit, don't do it, we're not going to do it.
Yeah.
Apparently the thing that restarted it was that one of them was at a party with some of the management of the Los Angeles Times, and I can't really quite believe this, but apparently there were Mormons who were in the ownership of the Los Angeles Times. It just doesn't, I don't know why that doesn't work for me, but I can't remember whether it was Bob Wellcott or Joel Sapel, said, oh yeah, they believe this thing where there's this, you're full of all of these little beings. And at this point, the guy just looks at him and says, we're going to publish. And it's like, and it was the sense that Scientology had offended this man by letting the word know that we're all possessed with loads of little entities, because that's a big secret in the Christian religion, the Jewish religion, the Muslim religion, and the Buddhist. The Hindus are not so keen on it. But I don't know about Australian Aborigines. Do they believe in indwelling demons?
I hope so.
Yeah, it'd be nice, wouldn't it? They should have the same rights as everybody else to.
Yeah, because I quite like belief in demons. That's quite fun.
It is, because it means you're never alone.
No, there's so many of them as well. All those little demons that in the sort of, what's it called? The org board of demonology.
Yeah, the clusters. The musters of clusters in Scientology. Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many demons, and they've all got names and personalities and special areas, and it's mental that people have been so specific about these imaginary beings. Probably.
What makes you think they're imaginary?
Well, I'm saying probably to cover myself.
Yeah, just in case the demons sue you.
Yeah, because I wouldn't want to be sued by a demon, unless
especially
they had a bad lawyer.
Yeah.
If they had a rubbish lawyer, then I wouldn't mind.
Yeah, but they have excellent lawyers, the demons do, when it
Demons
comes
do.
down to it. Yeah, it is a it is a thought. I mean, the Christian demonology is incredibly extensive. They've got hundreds of names for these beings. The Jews don't seem to. They just say, "Oh, they're dibbuks," and they can't be bothered. But you get ones like Ashtaroth, for example. Come.
Yeah.
Well, Ashtaroth is Asherah, who, when you go back into the Babylonian religion, is Jehovah's mother.
Right.
So that's Astarte, Asherah. It's not very nice, is it? You know.
No, it's not great.
Your own mum.
Yeah, yeah.
And Beelzebub is Baal Marduk, who is Jehovah's brother.
Marduk, Jehovah's brother.
Baal Marduk, the golden calf in the desert. Baal. He's one of the 70 brothers of Jehovah.
The cosmologies are fascinating,
aren't they?
They're absolutely wild, and I love them. And that's, I think, what sucked me into the cult, is the idea that there was this whole cosmology of being, and it turned out to be robots, insects, and spaceships.
Yeah, and the robots had doll bodies.
Yeah,
but it didn't mean doll in a nice way.
So it's not a very interesting sort of cosmology. It's kind of rubbish. And then when you get into the OT levels and the cosmology behind Xenu.
Oh, that was so awful. I remember sitting the first day in the waiting room and I'm reading this thing going, I've spent 7 years getting to this. I've just spent, however many 2,000 quid on these things. And this guy walked in the room and he said, it's just like Colin Wilson's Mind Parasites, isn't it? And I went, because it is. And I'd read that book. And it's like, how did he know I'd read that book?
Yeah, it's very OT of him.
Yeah.
To know that you'd read it.
Yeah, incredible. Absolutely incredible. I went back 3 days after I did it and said it didn't work. And you think, I'm going to be sent to ethics. I'm going to have to pay to retread it. At least you only have to pay half price the second time. Yeah. But instead, the guy who had been the TechSec UK, the top guy in the counselling thing, he looked at me and he said, and he'd realised that you make the money in the sales division, so he wasn't being the top guy in the counselling. He looked at me and said, a lot of people find that.
Yeah.
OT3 doesn't work for many people. Kind of thing. Then after OT4, when all those freeloading druggy body thetans, I paid good money to get rid of them, right? They didn't pay anything, so I did nothing for them. I go back to him and say, I'm sorry, I don't really feel any different. And he said, a lot of people find that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Scientology doesn't work, does it? A lot of people find that.
Yeah.
But
yeah, they're all SPs.
Yes. In fact, the numbers are the wrong way around. Hubbard said 2.5% of the population are suppressive persons. The reality is 2.5% aren't. And the rest of us have all been. Yeah, when I first saw the list of 900 and something suppressive persons, and you're going, well, there are only about 10,000 people in Scientology. I mean,
and half of them have been declared suppressive.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. And that's for their body thetans. Who knows how many of them are suppressive?
Well, one hopes that you'd keep on auditing and getting rid of them. Even in spite of the org, just get an e-meter and do OT7 on yourself. Sod the prereqs.
Well, I knew somebody who did that.
Really?
He was thrown off the ship, and I should mention him by name actually because he's been offensive to me online. I said that he was into Aleister Crowley. This guy Ralph Hilton.
Yeah,
and I knew him. I knew him at the end of '83, and when I was still kind of, I knew Hubbard was not a very nice person and told a lot of lies. I'd only been out for a couple of months, but I was actually finishing off OT5 or Advanced Ability 5 or what have you. And Ralph came along and he desperately wanted to know what was on OT4, 5, 6, 7 because he'd left after doing OT3 and he guessed it would probably be body thetans, which seems strange to me because OT3, the end phenomenon of OT3 is no more body thetans.
Yeah.
So that doesn't seem to work very well.
No.
And he, you know, he was he told me that he'd actually installed a counter in his, wherever you put those things, mind. And it told him he was automatically auditing body thetans off all the time.
Oh, that's not really on policy, is it?
No, well, he was beyond any of that. He was, you know, going to the next level. Of course, policy says you can't think of anything. Ron Hubbard's the only person who's aware of the universe. So, you know, tough. You know, you can't discover technology, unlike Freud and Anaxagoras Korzybski or any of von Leeuwenhoek or any of the other people that Hubbard says had discovered the technology that he developed along the way. I find that many contradictions, many conflicts. I said to him, I said, look, he'd spent all these years doing this privately and automatically. You're just getting rid of them. I said, I've got a problem with this. And here it is. It's very simple. If something bad happens to you, that's called a motivator.
Yeah.
Because backwards in time, that's the justification you will use for you actually having started it with an overt. So I said, you have got body thetans in clusters plastered all over you, to the extent that it's taken years and you've still not got rid of them all. And they obviously keep coming in. What overt did you commit? What's the magnet that holds them to you? And I could say this quite confidently because I was a natural clear, which means I'd never had a reactive mind.
Yeah.
It's not permitted anymore, by the way.
No, they're not. They don't let you be a natural clear.
Not anymore. But they'd take your money for it back then. I was also, therefore, I worked this out after I'd done OT3. I went, well, if I'm a natural clear, that means I wasn't here when OT3 happened. Because the R6 bank was built then. So I'm also a natural OT3. I want my money back. You know?
Yeah, quite.
Would you like others to have the abilities you now have? Anyway, we got as far as the guy pissing himself on your sofa and a little bit beyond that.
Yeah. So anyway, over the next couple of weeks, I spent quite a fair bit of time with this lad, and got sucked into the cult. You know, how do you get a job here? You just ask. Oh, I want to join Division 2 because they drink the most beer.
Yeah, and they also get 2% of all their sales. So some of them, you know, actually can afford underpants and socks and things that the normal members don't get.
Yes. So it was my job to be a registrar, which is a salesperson. I didn't know anything about Scientology. I'd not read any of those massive green volumes or the big red volumes. Volumes that are a huge load of policy and technology.
12 of the red technical volumes at that time, and I think 9 of the green. Great big things. In fact, I've got one here actually, Ed. Let me demonstrate to anybody that's not seen a red volume what a red volume looks like. This is a red volume.
I threw mine away. I just threw everything away that was connected to the cult.
Oh, more fool you. That you could have sold those for £1 each on eBay, mate. Even though they cost £200 each.
Yeah. So that's the Tech Division 4. That one. That's got all the whole track stuff in it.
That's where you find. Well, I actually have the one upstairs here. Oh, this is terrible. You are a bad person. You reminded me of this. I've got Technical Volume 2 here.
Oh, technical, yeah.
I'm sorry that I've got to do this. I think I've already probably done this in videos before, but this is the whole tracks sec check. I'm not sure. And this is a book you could just buy. You didn't have to. Now I'm going to have to try and look it up. I thought I got it marked actually. Let's see. Well, it's not that one.
The whole track sec check.
Not that one there. 3 methods of dissemination. Handling press. Tell them to bugger off.
I read all of the green volumes and all of the red volumes.
No.
While I was at St. Hill.
You can't do that.
I went to study there and I learned
All of them.
everything. And as soon as I'd finished the last bit and was about to go into my internship as an auditor, as soon as I finished everything, I went, right, I'm going home. I secretly left like an SAS job. I got my sister and her boyfriend to come down with a van, and collect me and all my gear, and run off to London. And that's what I did. I escaped because I've got it all, and it was quite not. Well, it was not very good.
I was looking in the wrong book.
I studied everything, and it wasn't very good.
We've known each other what, like 24 years or something, and
Yeah.
And a lovely time it's been so far. But I didn't realise that all I haven't read. You know, I'm like, you know, this great expert on this subject. I've never managed to read all of either of those sets. I'm so impressed.
Yeah, I did the entire OEC.
The Organisation Executive course.
Yeah, and then I did the St. Hill Special Briefing course.
Yeah. So, which is what, about 350 L. Ron Hubbard lectures until
at least
you can't breathe anymore.
They send you to sleep, and you have to look up your misunderstood words when you start nodding off because he's so boring. Dear, oh dear. And he thinks he's funny.
Yeah.
And he's not really very funny.
No, and the people around are kind of laughing nervously because they don't quite understand what he's saying, but they don't want him to hit them.
Yeah.
Use e-meter clean hands to convince people that a population is loyal and that reforms are in order. In the riots in London, anybody arrested has his fine paid for him by some mysterious group.
Ooh.
Demonstrators are recruited. So this isn't limited to South Africa. And this is where he's explaining how it's called interrogation. This is real, isn't it? Hubbard Communications Office Bulletin of the 30th of March 1960. It was sent to all auditors in South Africa.
Put the cans under the armpits if they can't grab them.
Interrogation: how to read an e-meter on a silent subject. When the subject placed on a meter will not talk, but can be made to hold the cans or can be held while the cans are strapped to the soles or placed under the armpit. I am sorry if that sounds brutal. It isn't. I'm just reading what the man says. It is still possible to obtain full information from the subject.
And it's actually not. Like date and locate, it's not possible because it's nonsense. You can't, with a meter, you can't say, right, what does the road you live on begin with? A, B, C, D, E, F, Longfall. It turns out to be Fitzpatrick Street. That is fiction.
Yeah, you need a Ouija board to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Much quicker.
It's such nonsense.
It's like a polygraph. It reacts to stress, and that's it.
Yeah.
And you know the variations of needle movement are interesting, but there's a horrible story. Went to Toronto in 2015 and did a week of going on about Scientology and recorded it all with like TV cameras. We had 4 of them and all of this stuff. It was great. And there's a guy there called John McLean, whose mum, Nan McLean. They're both well known for the great work they did over the years. John was in his 60s. Nan was 92, I think, by this time. She was fantastic. The stuff we recorded with her. John went on stage as well. We hadn't expected them to be there, but they only lived like an hour's drive away, and they turned up. And John told me that he'd been in this organization when Hubbard was docked in Morocco, and the King of Morocco had decided he was going to use the e-meter and this technique, the interrogation technique, to see if the members of the senior members of his intelligence agency or secret police, I think is another term used for such people, if they were loyal. And John, at that point, got his passport and went home to Canada because he knew what was going to happen next. And it did happen. And here we are, all of these years, 45 years later, and he's still crying because he knew what was going to happen. And it did happen. these people were checked on the e-meter, and then some of them were executed.
Yeah.
And you're going, this is a machine that measures stress. Do you feel stressed out about me? I'm just about to kill you. Do you feel stressed out at all?
Yeah, long fall.
Yeah, very long indeed.
Oh, dear.
But no, I was after the, sorry, I digress. The scientific treatment of the insane is in here.
Yes, the scientific treatment of the insane. I remember it very well.
Treatment of the insane. The insanity rate per capita in South Africa is appalling.
Yeah, they're mad, that lot.
Let's face it, the insanity rate everywhere is appalling. There shouldn't be any insane people, so therefore any insanity rate. I mean, what's he saying? You know, that the level of child abuse in this country is bad. Well, it's not good in other countries, is it?
Yeah.
Unless they don't do it. Through the papers and reports of Peggy Conway and other sources, it's easily seen that a primary requisite in any program of the rehabilitation of the Bantu in South Africa would be mental health. So he's now saying, and Bantu at this time doesn't mean the Bantu people, does it, in South Africa? It means anybody black.
Anybody who's black.
Yeah. So black people are mentally ill in large numbers, so they need to be rehabilitated.
Yeah. I remember in the technical training corps, we had 3 people actually from Zimbabwe, and they were all thought I was being a bit mad.
Would that have been? That's when Sifo was there. Nkosalati Moyo, Sifo Gumbo, William.
Didn't know those 2. I knew Zena and Moses.
Wow, you had you had ones. I met 4, so they must have. I mean, and they told all these people in Zimbabwe that they were coming to a Christian church to study, and they get jobs and all this stuff. And then when they arrived, they said, "We've got your passports. You can't afford to go home."
That's
because
right.
At that point in Zimbabwe, I think the wage was less than £8 a week, where here it was about 250. So a ticket home. There was an Ethiopian there, Musi Hailu, and he was stuck for 18 months because he couldn't afford to go home. He couldn't get home. You know, you couldn't go to the Ethiopian embassy and say, repatriate me. They'd say, repatriate yourself, mate, because that's what it's like at the Ethiopian embassy. And so he's had to spend 18 months. And from the day he arrived, he went, no, this is bad. Yeah. This is harmful. So for 18 months, he carefully collected documents until he got a stack yay big. And then he came to see me. And he said, I've got all these documents. I said, that's your problem. He said, no, I want you to have them. I say, I can't have them because that would be theft. You have to return them. And he did return them, I believe. Yeah. But they were copied before they were returned, not by me. But the copies were then given to me, just to show that we understand how the law works. Yeah. I then gave them to organizations called newspapers. We had 3 front page stories in national newspapers from those documents, you know, about mistreatment of children. There was a case where 2 young women were seen holding hands, and they were lesbians, therefore. And one of them, the punishment was they had an empty underground cesspit, you know, where the sewage collects. And they put this poor young woman in there, I think, for 3 days.
Oh, in the cesspit.
Yeah. That's, see, it's a religion.
Yeah, it's we make the able more able.
That's right. And the police can't do anything about it because it's a religion. If you want to spend of your own volition 3 days in a cesspit underground alone.
Or in a bilge tank in a ship.
Yeah. Or a chain locker.
Yeah.
You know, if you choose to be thrown off a ship or showered with cold water, or what, they've still, all the places they used to throw people in the lake at these. I only found this out after I left. They were still doing it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's incredible the way that the overstroke motivator sequence is misused by the cult to make you always wrong.
Yeah. So why are all these nasty things happening to Ron Hubbard and Scientology then? Oh, it's because we're such good people.
They pulled it in. So
it was
if
explained.
you pulled it in, then it takes the blame off the guy who's actually abusing you. He can punch you and punch you and punch you, and say you pulled this in.
It is said
and he's indemnified against any blame.
You're absolutely right, and it said that this actually happened, that somebody worked this out. They went into Manchester, I was told, in the 1990s. It was Mark Dean who told me this story, who we both know.
Yeah.
That somebody had walked into the Manchester org, knocked the registrar to the ground, looked at him and said, "You pulled that in." And it was, of course, we grieved for the poor registrar and his broken nose. But it does kind of sum the whole hypothesis up in one. Sadly, it's not an original thought, because the guys who wrote Red Dwarf, I think one of them was saying that he wanted to punch Buddhists in the face and ask them about their karma. So apparently the joke's been done before. But it was, Hubbard would get sick. Anybody else gets sick, it's because they're connected to suppressive people. He gets sick for one of two reasons. Firstly, he's researching new technology and so taking great risks. Secondly, he's got his annual bronchial pneumonia. Clearing course videos. There he is saying, "Oh, last year, and now I cured myself of it." The next year, it's OT3, the wall of fire. He goes through the wall of fire. I cured myself of it.
Knocks him about a bit and breaks his arm.
Oh, they're 72. That was in fact coming off a motorcycle. That's what broke his arm. Yeah, he said he broke his back on OT3.
Oh, yeah.
But I managed to super glue it back together again, so it was fine.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
The things that he did for us. What an individual.
Yeah, the risks he took with our money.
Yeah, with our money. Going back 75 million years and figuring it all out. Exactly why we have wars. That's amazing.
It's pretty incredible, isn't it? Oh no.
Fourth dynamic engram.
The fourth dynamic engram. In What to Audit, Scientology, A History of Man, as it was really called.
With the bear on the cover. The bear with a person's face.
Yeah, it's horrifying, isn't it? I don't have the Discover. It was just, it keyed in my R6 bank.
Yeah.
Too much, which I don't have because I'm a natural clear.
Yeah.
He says in there, it starts, this is a cold-blooded and factual account of your last 60 trillion years.
Yeah.
And it could just be me, but I sit down and I go, how long would it take to write a history of 1,000 years, 10,000 years, 100,000 years, 1,000,000 years? I mean, there's nothing, human history as it is, we've only been doing it since about, I don't know, is it Herodotus or Heraclitus? It's one of those Greek H blokes, We've only been doing it for about less than 2,500 years.
Yeah.
So to get all of 60 trillion years for all of us, and do you know how long it took, the research? Don't, do you?
No.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah, and you know how they speeded it up?
In depth.
Not in depth. That they took a huge amount of amphetamines. No, not fun. It's speed. Makes you quicker. It's in the name.
Yeah.
So they managed to actually research 60 million years in 2 weeks. L. Ron Hubbard, Mary Sue Hubbard, and L. Ron Hubbard the Nipper, L. Ron Hubbard Jr. Nibs. And because speed was perfectly legal, Hubbard had recommended it. There are many places, grab hold of Benzedrine, all that stuff.
In Dianetics, he talks about speed.
Still, and the last edition I saw, it was still in there because David Miscavige can't read and write. So he doesn't know that Hubbard is recommending. He says in there that alcohol is the worst drug and that marijuana is not bad at all.
Yeah.
And that's in 1950. But he personally drank a bottle of spirits a day for many years and didn't smoke marijuana at all. So he's even a hypocrite when he comes to recommending drugs. I found it.
The wrong drugs.
Yeah, the wrong drugs, the ones that make you feel good.
Those ones.
Or the ones that take pain away. Or I mean, he was, as far as I can tell, amphetamines, barbiturates, alcohol, nicotine, pretty evidently, 100 cigarettes a day.
The drugs of violence.
Yeah.
Speed and alcohol are drugs of violence.
Yeah.
David Nutt actually said that cocaine is probably why we had financial crash in 2008.
Well,
David Nutt blames it on coke.
It's not impossible, is it? I mean, there's some people who blame Donald Trump on the Adderall he uses.
Yeah.
Adderall contains 4 amphetamines in a perfect balance. Hitler, of course, was also addicted to amphetamines.
Yes, he was. Yes.
And the first man to experiment with fecal transplants with capsules of shit from lovely SS men, which he swallowed rather than having pushed up his bum, which is the modern technology for the Hitler.
Yeah. So fecal transplants taken orally is pretty horrific. That's not very good, is it?
It's not, but apparently his doctor's notebooks became available a few years ago, and the sheer amount of amphetamine.
Yeah, there's that Norman Ohler book about the drugs in the Third Reich.
How do you spell Ohler?
Ohler.
Oh, yeah.
And it's originally written in German. And
that's a bit difficult of him, isn't it? He could have written it in English.
Very well translated.
Yeah.
And he goes into great detail about Hitler's speed habit, his methamphetamine injections, and
Pervitin, is it the Nazi speed?
Pervitin, yeah, that's what was given to.
I mean, even the name of it, you should have guessed. Pervitin. There's something wrong with that, you know.
Yeah. Oh, might be that Pervitin.
Yeah.
And all the tank commanders were speeding out their faces, and it enabled the great rush across Belgium into Normandy. And Hitler didn't believe that that's how far they were. He thought they were hundreds of miles back.
And did they go through Verdun, was it? And the French just fell back. And the Germans didn't, in fact, even have the fuel logistics. And they'd been ordered to stop. And they were so far out on the Pervitin, they just kept on going. And they conquered France.
Yeah. Sort of almost by accident, but it was completely made possible by methamphetamine.
Yeah, and people say drugs are bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They weren't bad for the Nazis. When the British started using amphetamines, they defeated...
How dare you say such a thing?
They defeated the Nazis in North Africa.
And the Battle of Britain.
Yeah, speed was keeping people up in the air.
I knew a Battle of Britain nurse. She was a friend of mine. Yeah. And it surprised me one day, this woman who's like 80 years old or what have you, saying, of course, they were terrified out of their lives, those boys. And every time they came down, we just put more amphetamine into them and sent them back off again.
Yeah.
And so the Battle of Britain was won by 2 things. One, the incredible signalling unit that had been set up to show the position of the German aircraft, the radar, but the observation post. The Germans had radar, they didn't have the observation post. And then those clever women with what are those sticks? Penny pushing sticks, or I'm not sure what they are.
The things you get in casinos that drag the chips away.
That's what they are. That's how they came up with it. But that's one half of why the battle was won, and the other is amphetamines. Yeah. I read a school instruction manual on drugs called Skull Boy, and they could neither spell the word skull nor the word boy, because skull has 2 L's and boy has a Y at the end.
Yeah.
But never mind. And it said in there that the Germans and the Japanese used amphetamines.
Yeah.
And they're the people who use them. And I'm going, and the British and the Americans. And in fact, I think apart from the French army, to this day, they have modafinil in their backpacks to keep them awake. I think all of the other armies have speed, but it's not called amphetamine anymore. It's called, but now, of course, 10% of American school children are on Ritalin or Adderall. What am I talking about?
Yeah.
Where are we living? Not in America, thankfully, but
it's interesting how prevalent drugs are in our society.
Now, drug war on drug society. Yeah.
Yeah, and there are people on Adderall and Ritalin and, you know, speeding out their faces, and it's all completely fine.
Well, just SSRIs, Prozac, sertraline, that have penetrated the population so deeply. And according to Eli Lilly and medical research, they're only effective on endogenous depression. So it's only if it's a physiological thing, brain thing that's going on, that it'll be effective. It won't, it's not. So the other 80% of people who present with what I call unhappiness or reactive depression, something shit has happened to them and they feel shit. You go, and you're sane, mate. You just need something to cheer you up. And putting on a drug that will regulate you so you can never be cheered up isn't necessarily the best. You know, no, there will be no serotonin in my brain. It's all passing through and coming back. You know, I don't know if you've seen this, and I shouldn't say this publicly, but I'm going to. Have you ever met somebody that was taking Prozac that took ecstasy?
I'm sure I have.
Nothing happens.
No.
I knew somebody who took 4 goes, and they came to me afterwards and said nothing happened with this. And I'm going, what did you do again? It's like, well, you do realize that you've got a serotonin regulator and a serotonin enhancer playing with each other, and it's a draw. Anyway, along the way, before we admitted to our knowledge of substances, I found the whole track sect change. Will you share that with the ladies and gentlemen of
you ever enslaved a society?
Slave? Yes, I have been. Yes. What is it? Mugum Gai Pan.
Mugum Gai Pan.
Yeah. See? That is a real insider joke. That one is. The sec check whole track, and the preamble to this is that in 1959, L. Ron Hubbard Jr., who was mentioned as taking speed and being one of the 3 researchers who found out everything we've done in the last 60 trillion years, and discovered, for example, that human beings are descended from clams, which are called either the weepers or the boohoos.
That's right.
Yeah, that they found that out. I don't know who gave them that name at the time. Probably the Thetans.
You get a pain in your jaw when you think about those clams too much. If you do that clam maneuver.
Yeah, you must never do that.
Start going, my jaw's gone funny.
If you keep chewing for too many hours, it hurts. And that's not because you've hurt yourself by chewing too much. It's because you used to be a boohoo.
That's right. It's got nothing to do with the amphetamines you've taken.
No.
And the chewing that's happened as a result of that. It's got nothing. Your jaw hurts because you used to be a boohoo.
Yeah. Also, you smoke cigarettes because of your fear of volcanoes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not smoking enough causes cancer.
Yes, it really does as well. And the way to stop smoking is to smoke even more.
Smoke twice as much.
Yeah. And he got up to 100 a day. There's a testimony by Kimmer Douglas in the Armstrong case in June 1984, where she was his personal nurse. And it said of her, she was the only person to actually decide to walk away from Ron Hubbard.
Yeah.
Other people were thrown out when he was done with them. But Kimmer just said, and on the stand, she said, I thought he had a chance because he cut down from 100 to 80 cigarettes a day. These are unfiltered Picoon cigarettes made in New Orleans. Can't get them generally, they're special. Because Cools, unfiltered, weren't strong enough.
Yeah.
And he had somebody with a lighter and somebody with an ashtray when he was making his technical film, so he could always get rid of the last one, get the new one, you know. Always have one lit. And he one of the things he said to one of the messengers then was that he wished he'd never started smoking. And going, you're the founder of Narconon, the drug rehabilitation agency.
Yeah.
When I wanted to stop smoking, and I did it for 27 years, I just went, I'm quit, I'm done.
Yeah. Yeah, I did the same thing with cigarettes.
Yeah. Just go, I don't want to do this, it's killing me.
Yeah. I did the same thing with alcohol as well.
Yeah, exactly. had many a long year when I didn't drink at all because
yeah,
it upset my stomach. And it's like, well, I'm just not doing that, can't afford
yeah.
it.
When you get to sort of our age, it batters the shit out of you having a drink. If you have a bottle of wine, it really hurts the next day.
Yeah. Oh, I
Oh,
stopped drinking because I realized it was poisonous. It was like
yeah.
this, oh yeah, something that makes you feel bad the next day is a poison.
It's
And
a waste product from a bacterium.
yeah, you've got the wrong stuff going in your system, and it's having a go at you.
Bacteria shit.
Yeah,
Essentially, that's what alcohol is.
yeah, and it's good. It's really good for pickling things, including the
Yeah,
inside of your body.
yeah, yeah. No, I'm really glad I stopped drinking because I used to drink a lot.
Yeah,
That's what dragged me into the cult. Is the promise of more beer.
yeah, exactly.
Wow, in this religion you can drink everything.
Mm.
That's really cool.
On your whole track, did you find that you'd owned breweries over hundreds of millions of years?
No, I found out that I was a rock star
Wrong item on the list.
in a huge, like a massive festival with a
Disaster area.
Yeah, it was exactly like disaster area. Huge rock star in space, like a massive rock star, and it was just nonsense.
So what happened was that Aaron Hubbard Jr. goes to be, meet his dad, the hero of all of his dreams, who's abandoned him when he was 6, 7, 41. Not really seen him. He's lived with his grandparents and his mum,
Yeah,
which was a habit set up in the Hubbard or Wilson family. Of course, it's his father adopted the name Hubbard. He has no ancestors called Hubbard that we know. His real name would be L. Ron Wilson. But anyway, Nibs wants to go and spend time with his, be with his dad at 18, goes and becomes Hubbard's enforcer, and physically so at times, from 1952, and the first thing he did was, son, take these pills and lie on the couch. That was his first experience of Scientology.
wow.
Testing his whole track recall with a huge dose of amphetamines.
Yeah.
And for 7 years, he is his father's deputy. He is the only person really close to his father, beyond possibly Mary Sue Hubbard. I'm not really so sure because she doesn't seem to have believed. From all I can make out, she called him a charlatan and said that she'd never been exterior and that had to be proved to her. And Otto Rose had to find every exteriorization process ever run. And I think he told me he found something like 90.
Yeah, there's loads of them.
Run them all on Mary Sue until she went exterior. In the end, Mary Sue, after a week or two, just went, just leave me alone. So that was as far as she got with it. But Nibs basically had to leave because he couldn't afford to feed his children because his dad wouldn't pay him enough money to feed his children. It was that bad. He left.
Yeah.
And suddenly this new practice called security checking came in. And everybody had to be checked on an e-meter. Then a bunch of staff later in Johannesburg would leave and you get the famous Johannesburg security check. Then security checking became confessionals. And then confessionals became integrity processing.
Yes.
Which you were well trained in doing. And the lists are the same. So this list, which was used, though rarely, because you don't usually go whole track on overts, because you want to know stuff they've done that they can be blackmailed about.
Yeah.
And you say, 3 lifetimes ago, you were Jack the Ripper.
They don't give a shit.
No.
It's not blackmailable material.
Yeah, the police should be more, astute about this, I think. But, and arrest people who, whatever. So this one, it's still, despite this having been issued in the 70s after integrity processing had become the name, this is still called the security check for the whole track. And it has, have you ever enslaved a population?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I have.
Have you ever sacked a city? You're sacked. Have you ever sunk or otherwise destroyed a non-combatant vessel?
Yeah,
Lusitania, was that you?
that was me.
Yeah, I thought so. There were loads of them, weren't there, in the First War, that American
Yeah,
ships that were sunk. And Lusitania was 2 years before war was declared. So that's just something of a red herring in the history books. Have you
yeah.
ever ordered or
It was
have you
90,
ever ordered or yourself committed genocide, Ed?
a
Come
couple
on,
of
be honest.
a couple of times.
And that's over 1.25 years, I think the OT5 materials goes back to. Just twice. In all that time?
Well, I've been quite good.
You have been good. That's very unusual. Have you ever annihilated a population?
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was great.
Have you ever deliberately spread disease? Now, there's one that's relevant at the moment.
That's relevant. Yeah.
That bloke who's been driving around in Wales and he's been arrested 6 times for driving around because he's breaking the regulations and he's going to get somebody infected with COVID-19. You're going, how?
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
driving around in his car on his
On his
own.
own. He's
We're the Welsh police, though. We know better, boy. You know. Have you ever raped a child of either sex? It's nice you have to differentiate immediately that one of them might not be considered rape in your culture, like mooty marriage, for example, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Without saying too much about nutcases. Have you ever warped an educational system?
I hope so.
Yeah, oh, that's pleasing. Have you ever destroyed a culture? Have you ever blanketed bodies for the sensation kick? Now, come on, tell us. Ooh.
Have you ever blanketed bodies?
Blanketed bodies. My son asked me what that meant. And I said, son, I can't tell you. I know what blanketed bodies. I know what it sounds like, but would that be a bad thing? You know, somebody's been in an accident and you've got some of that silver foil and you wrap it around them.
Yeah. Or maybe you just tuck them in.
As long as you don't do it for the sensation kick, it's okay.
Yeah, so it's okay to tuck people in and give them a little kiss. Good night. That's all right.
Probably.
Like, have you ever blanketed bodies?
Of either sex.
Yeah, I've put the kids to bed.
Have you ever bred bodies for degrading purposes? All the time.
See, it's not very interesting whole track stuff, though, is it?
Nobody does this. This one died within 2 weeks of coming out. I've never met anybody that's done.
It's a waste of time because there's nothing in it that you could be blackmailed for.
Nothing.
That's all they're trying to find. All they're trying to find is overts. And
if they could get you to sign it at the end, they might be able to blackmail you with it. Because then you could take it to any psychiatric institution and say, look, they've confessed to all this.
Yeah. I've enslaved the population and I've wiped out an entire culture. Oh, dear.
And in the last 1,250,000, 1 million years, million, quadrillion and a quarter. And I want to know, every time this has happened, okay? In that time, is there anything you would have done differently if you had had more data? This morning when I went to Tesco's to get some herrings, I could have got some bananas. I mean, this is going to be a long list for 1.25 quadrillion years. You know, it's anything that you would have done differently if you'd had more data.
Yeah, and that's for trillions and trillions of years. Scan through that entire time for any point at which you felt you didn't know enough.
Did you come to Earth for evil purposes?
Oh.
Or should that be, did you come to Earth for evil purposes?
Yeah, it must be true because I left the cult. Yeah. So I must have evil purposes. Otherwise, I wouldn't have left it. I wouldn't have buggered off. I would have stayed and fought to clear the planet.
Well, you only blow because you've got overts. And the fact that you haven't blown or left means you can't have any overts. How long have you lived where you live?
About 20 years.
So in 20 years, you haven't committed any overts. L. Ron Hubbard used to move at least 3 times a year.
Yeah.
And even when he was, the 1959 to 65, when he's supposedly at East Grinstead, he spends a load of time in South Africa, in the Canary Islands,
Yeah.
down to New Zealand, Australia, doing who knows what, because people became so frightened of him, they would not. From those early years, there are people who will never talk about what he did. John McMaster, the world's first real clear,
yeah,
1965, he said, "I was a little surprised when Ron told me that I was the first clear, but he chose me." I had a phone call from a guy who was a Hollywood, I think he was a set designer or something, and he rang me up and he said, I was one of the first 10 clears, the real clears in 1965, and he laughed. And I thought, I'm going to get on with this guy. And I did. And he said, and we wondered why it was. He said, well, there was a group of us, 7 of us, in fact, and we called ourselves the Queer Clears because we were all gay.
We're all gay, yeah.
And then he said to me, "Why do you think that was?" And I went, "You haven't worked that out. In 1965, your reputation could be destroyed utterly by saying you were gay. And Hubbard had got you confessing it. And now he's putting you out into..." John McMaster toured the world with his boyfriend. Good for him. But when after I interviewed him, I think the second time I interviewed him for 3 hours each time on tape. And the second time when I got there, he said, "I want to record this myself." And you can check the tapes. That's what he sounds like.
Yeah.
"I want to record this myself." And he presses the play button instead of the record button. And there he is saying, "I have come to bring this to you and you and you. I may be just like a broken down TV." And I'm going, "I'm sorry, what do you mean by TV in this sense?" But... And then he switched it off. He realized where the stop button was and switched it off. And then he did it. And it's like he'd rehearsed it, taped it, he'd been over it. And that bit was actually from a speech he used to give in his tours of 1965-66. I met so many people who absolutely adored and worshipped this guy.
Yeah.
And the man I met was a declining alcoholic who had that was his life. He ended up floating in the water, I think 72, 2 broken collarbones. And they left him in there for 3 hours. And that was him done with Scientology, having been thrown off the ship.
Yeah.
Deliberately overboarded off the ship.
Yeah.
But I was going to say something. This idea that, they select these people and they would be this. But McMaster told me that, having been all around the world on behalf of Scientology and recruited, he was Scientology's ambassador to the United Nations.
Really?
Yeah. I don't think he ever let him in, but he was. They just didn't realize it.
Yeah.
But he said he'd met lots of little red-headed children.
Oh, right.
And he's the only person I've ever heard that from. So whether it was true or not on reflection, I don't know. But then you see what Nibs has to say about his father's sexual practices and the whole kind of, he was the most wonderful human. He was Maitreya. He was the future Buddha, during whose lifetime everybody will evaporate into nirvana. Well, that didn't happen, did it? Unless, of course, they faked his death.
That's probably true.
Wow, he'd be 103 now, so that's not as old as Bob Hope managed. He managed 104.
He managed 100. Yeah, something like that.
So, and Hitler, how old's Hitler now? He's 120, 30, 130, 41 or something. 31, I think.
Yeah. He was born in the 1800s, so it will be at least 100.
1879. 21, no, 1889. 11. Yeah, he's 25 when the First War starts.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Bless him. Well, not
bless him on fire in a ditch.
Yes, exactly. Oh, dear. Yeah, so the whole track sec check.
Yeah,
but you got to get some idea of it. It's like what I'm looking at. It starts here, and then it goes. Oh, I have to balance this on my collarbone now. It goes there.
Yeah.
And then it goes to there. And when you've done all those questions, you get these. And when you've done these questions, oh, there's another page. And when they're through, oh, you finally get to the end.
Yeah. What's the last one? What's the last check question?
The last one I've got noticed is... Sorry. Have you ever failed to rescue your leader?
Failed to rescue your leader?
That's the last question. Because
Oh,
if you've ever done that,
yeah,
you're gone.
That's terrible. And the thing is when you read this whole track sec check, there's nothing that's not just sort of messed. You know, the people. Have you ever done this to people or robots or insects? And that's all there is in Hubbard's mind. His idea of the whole track is really unimaginative and disappointing.
Yeah.
When you read a whole track sec check, you want to read something really interesting and wild, you know, with multi-dimensional stuff and teleportation and, you know, you want all that. You don't want insects, people and robots.
Yeah. Human slaves in an insect nation.
Ah.
I remember that was the first time I ever heard Saw Bill Bailey. I mean, that was at your apartment, your flat.
Yeah.
Fond memories.
He's funny. Bless him. Where's he been for the last year?
Don't know.
I haven't seen him.
He did the thing on Wallace, what used to be called the Darwin-Wallace theory of evolution, but is now called the Darwin theory of evolution, because Wallace got, as you know, got to at the same time. And he said in it, 2 programs, and he went to the places that Wallace had gone to, and Wallace had to go to like Indonesia and the jungles and places that almost nobody survived in. Most of the plant collectors died from scorpion bites, or, you know, a fish going up their penis in the Amazon.
Kangaroo.
Yeah.
The kangaroo fish.
Kangaroo fish. They're very nice with sweet potatoes, but not very nice if they get in your penis. You can't pull them out, can you? Because they hook themselves in. It's
barbed, spindly fish that swim up your japper.
Yeah, it's just it's not to be thought about, and I'm glad we didn't.
It's not true though. There's no evidence that kangaroo do that, even though they're rumoured to.
It depends, you know, whether they've had a big night out or not before, I suppose. But
yeah.
Who knows what they'll do if they've been out with the registrar on the booze first.
Booze, yeah.
But it is, and you'll tell me next that mermaids don't exist, Ted. So we were in the middle of somewhere. I can't remember where it was all of a sudden. Well, what on earth? The whole track, what's that?
Yes.
Maybe we should go back to your story. When I met you, as you say, you'd walked out of the Saint Hill special briefing course.
Yes.
Did you complete it?
I completed all the theory.
Yeah.
And I was about to start the internship. And that's when I went, it's bollocks, I'm out.
And how long, when was that? Because I met you in 96.
That was in about 93.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, 93.
So you waited a while before writing to me.
Yeah. I was spending all my time in Swiss Cottage Library reading in the psychology section and gradually getting better and understanding more about what had happened in the cult. You know, I spent 5 hours, 6 hours a day in Swiss Cottage Library psychology section just finding out about cults and about manipulation and you know, all the important things that we need to know before we get involved in cults. And that was a good couple of years that I'd spent reading and reading and reading about cults and persuasion and
Yeah. And then you thought, I'll harass John Atack.
yeah, because your book was really important in recovery. Finding out what goes on behind the scenes rather than what the PR front is all about, because Scientology is all about PR and putting up a front of respectability and nothing bad ever happens here and quick cover it up if something bad happens.
The person who did that no longer works for us. We don't do that anymore.
We don't do that anymore.
Unless Ron tells us to, or David. They're struggling with, there were some accusations that they were busing people into their organizations and stuff. So David Miscavige apparently has done more to inhibit coronavirus than any living being.
I read the
Daily Beast.
I read the issue that he wrote talking about coronavirus. And it's interesting how the Sea Org are dealing with it, because they're going to work.
Yeah, well,
they're not social distancing at all. They don't think it applies to them.
They're not connected to any suppressive people, so they can't be ill.
They can't go PTS. And if somebody dies, then that's because of their connections.
Yeah, they pulled it in.
And they pulled it in. So
their time, their karma, their what have you.
Yeah, it's extremely callous, the way that SEAL people think about their colleagues who are ultimately expendable.
Yeah. Well,
everybody's expendable. You can cut them off as soon as they become SP.
It's a warrior culture, isn't it? But it's a warrior kind of secret police warrior culture where if you work in the Stasi or the KGB or the CIA, I dare say, that when somebody it turns out they were the devil incarnate and they've defected, when Charles Ames in the CIA, that he was one of 20 KGB agents implanted into the US intelligence service, so they knew everything. So in terms of pointlessness, having an organization of that type, it's like, why don't you just pick up the phone and tell them what you're going to do? It'd be so much cheaper. You wouldn't have to. We've got 10,000 people in MI5, is it? Internal security.
Yeah, it's a huge number of people.
Yeah, it's too many, and they monitor all of our phone calls, and have been doing since the 1980s through Echelon.
Yeah,
and the trigger keywords will be noted now, and the technology is 10 years ahead of everybody else. And David Icke apparently is a lizard.
That's actually true.
It is transdimensional one though, so only transdimensional flies can detect him.
Yeah, he's banging on about 5G at the moment.
Yeah,
5G is an energy weapon used against us, and then they're going to implant us all with little robot things that are implanted in vaccines, and then they're going to solve overpopulation by killing Bill Gates and George Soros. They're going to kill us off.
This was retailed to me by a friend of mine that sent me this. The population of the world, they want to reduce it to 500 million. Bill Gates is going to introduce the disease through the vaccine, which is going to get us. And they made COVID-19 and called it the Chinese virus. Oh no, that was Donald Trump who called it the Chinese virus.
He's a fool.
It's bizarre, isn't it? I thought George W. Bush that we weren't going to get further than that. As his father said, I don't know why people think he's stupid. He has a master's degree from Yale. And you go, yeah, you bought it. You've got the receipt for it. Why do you think he's stupid? It's like Dan Quayle, who could spell potato any way he liked.
Potato.
Let's call the whole thing off.
I'm kind of glad that it was, it's a real sad state of affairs when you look back fondly at George W. Bush in comparison to this disastrous orange nut bar.
Hunter S. Thompson said that he was going to have a chapter in every one of his books about what a bastard Nixon was. And so in Better Than Sex, which is about the Clinton election in 96 or whenever it was, sure enough, there's a chapter at the end of the book about what a bastard Richard Milhouse Nixon was. Then, when he was told that George W. Bush had been voted in, he said, "Where's Nixon when you need him?"
Yeah.
And then you get Trump.
Yeah, it just keeps getting worse.
He combines both the stupidity of the one and the criminality of the other.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure about the other side too much either. And now that it looks like, Bernie Sanders, who might have had something to offer, because he does have a background of having been truthful, open, concerned about the people's welfare. And
genuinely good bloke, even if he's dodgy on Israel.
Yeah, that's true. We should go and show him some Palestinians.
They're all dodgy about Israel. All the American mainstream are dodgy on Israel.
It's bizarre, isn't it? Because you've got a bunch of people who think that the 1.8% of the American population, the Jewish, are running the planet.
Yeah, yeah.
And then on the other half, you've got the same people who believe that Donald Trump, whose daughter and son-in-law are Jewish, is part of QAnon.
Yeah,
Q. Very, very confusing, the nonsense that people are willing to believe. But the idea that somebody, there's a documentary called Trump: An American Dream.
Yeah.
And it's about a 4-piece documentary. And it's much of it is footage of him throughout his life, his story, how he was sent to boot camp by his dad because he wouldn't bow down and be broken.
Yeah.
And how Norman Vincent Peale was their local pastor. The power of positive thinking. Think and God will give you money. Think and God will give you money. I'm thinking, God, give me money. This completely inhumane, hypnotize yourself into believing this thing. And you get a guy who in the middle of being told about a strike on Syria of US missiles killing, we believe, killing children. Yeah. He stops to say, the chocolate cake at Mar-a-Lago is the best in the world. When asked where something came from, he starts talking about the possible oranges.
Yeah.
Possible oranges of the problem. And it's like, the oranges of the species by Darwin. Yeah, of course. Origins are not the only fruit.
I remember that. That was sort of facepalm moment.
Yes.
But there are so many.
True.
And every day is another facepalm moment. He's an absolute menace.
Yeah, and every day is replete with contradictions. And obvious deceptions, which are self-deceptions, which is the part that makes you go. Robert J. Lifton, in this Bandy X-Lee's big book of psychiatrists and psychologists dissing Donald Trump because he's a danger to the nation. And Lifton in there says he's not a narcissist. That's a misdiagnosis. He's a solipsist. Nothing exists outside of himself.
Yeah.
And I'd go a step further. I'd say he doesn't exist. That he's just this attempt to reflect something. There is no person in there. It's just
he's completely hollow.
Yeah. But still, anyway, we probably we can wind up and do something else. Before we do that, though, I do want to say that this week, because I was going to talk with you, and we are the best of friends, but we only talk about once every 10 years. That knowing I was going to talk to you, another musician friend, and I said, I'll talk to Eddie, fantastic band, great drummer. And so I went off and I looked at Revolution, the video of Revolution.
Yeah.
Which I still really love from the first moment I saw it.
That's a good song. That's a really good song. I like it.
Exactly. And then, of course, I went, no, I need to find Holy Man.
Yeah.
And the sense I had was that Glenn was writing music, which you and he were putting into a groove because I saw you doing it one evening at one of the flats, that he came along and he got this little tune and you started slapping things about until they complied with the right syncopation in the thing. And Yap would put words over the top. But what Yap was doing, it was Yap who was writing the words, yeah. There was a kind of, it was like you were a philosophical unit also, because you were talking with him constantly about manipulation and your understanding of things like the Holocaust, which I know is also quite profound.
Yeah, because I've studied all sorts of things about persuasion, it leads you inevitably to looking at politics. Because politics is just a scaled up cultic movement.
Yeah. Always was right through the, look at the way the electoral system ran with the rotten boroughs and the buying of votes, and how the slave traders were able to control the parliament, so that even though a huge majority of the population, there were hundreds of thousands of signatures, weren't there, to petitions, the Clapham Sec petitions, but Parliament could ignore it because the guys who were selling the sugar, and therefore had the slaves that did the sugar or the cotton or what have you, had control of the commons. And that at that time, the idea that in the 1830s, that finally all men over a certain age can vote as long as they've got an address. And this gradual accretion of liberties, which were pretty much all taken away from us by the Blair government. Freedom of association, freedom of protest, freedom of speech, habeas corpus, a right since 1215.
Well, they were trying to introduce a 90-day.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Instead of 24 hours, 90 days, and they got 28.
Yeah.
But they still need a judge's approval, don't they? Which is no help whatsoever. Given, I remember it was Pickles, the very famous judge, who said, no, it wasn't. It was Christmas Humphreys, the Zen Buddhist judge, who was into Madame Blavatsky.
Oh, God.
Yeah. But he said, well, you know that 99% of the people that come to court are guilty because the police wouldn't have brought them here otherwise. And there's logic for you. Judge Pickles, who said short was two skirts, she was dying for it, about 2 months after saying that cannabis was perfectly all right. It's like ice. It's like when Santana, all those years later, said, yeah, man, it was the LSD, man. And tell them, the creative revolution of the late 60s, it was all of these people taking drugs. Terrible thing, but the truth. Sergeant Pepper, all of this. It's LSD. And you think he's saying something, and I'm not advocating LSD. I haven't taken it since I was 19, and I have no particular desire, unless you've got some really good stuff lying around, obviously. But, he's then the next minute, he's like, I've got this little being on my shoulder. He tells you, shut up, stop it. You were doing so well representing the hippie generation as a whatever it was. But so the sense I had was that the band was actually representing some really important issues. There weren't any little pop songs in there. There wasn't any trivial stuff. Every song that Yap was coming out with, and a lot of the hooks, a lot of the way that he'd, like, I wish you all well, I wish you all well, where he'd take a cliche line and push it at you in this context of the kind of, what was it, low-key sort of character that he played on stage, the evil coyote, not the nice African hair, not the one that does mischief, but showing you the pure evil of the establishment that the band was actually talking about, the whole drive of the music for, which makes you quite unusual. You kind of like the what's his name, Woody Guthrie of rap metal.
Yeah, that kind of fits, because we were essentially anarchists. We were reading Emma Goldman and Howard Zinn and Chomsky, and was writing lyrics about religion and the establishment and the fact that it's oil driven.
Yep.
You know, he'd talk about oil companies and there's always punching up, never punching down.
Yeah, yeah. I remember.
Really important.
Yeah, and the gigs are astonishing. So I saw the band 5 times, and you wouldn't have me down for somebody who'd be going to see any kind of metal band, unless it was King Crimson, obviously.
Yeah,
But I did see Black Sabbath, having said that, and I couldn't hear properly for a week after.
yeah.
That's the main thing. Oh, and Bill Ward falling off his drum stool. That's the.
It was Bill Ward. Excellent.
Yeah. They were Geezer Butler and Bill Ward and Naomi were really good. Just can't stand.
Great groove.
Yeah,
absolutely great.
I saw a band playing War Pigs, and it's like this guy Marcus King, who's this really fancy, fantastic guitar player in his early 20s, and they played a Carpenter's song, you know, and they play War Pigs, and you go, what an incredible riff that is, bah, bah. You know?
Yeah.
And then what a lyric from Ozzy: generals gathered in their masses, and you go, what rhymes with masses? Just like witches.
Black
masses.
Masses rhymes with masses. That's amazing. What a poet. I always found that jarring.
Yeah, yes. I always found Ozzy jarring. It was like, you know, couldn't they have had Ian Gillan singing if they wanted somebody to scream?
Yeah. Yeah, he did join Black Sabbath for one album, didn't he?
Yeah.
Born Again, I think it was.
Was it? I've never heard that. I must listen to
one of the worst album covers ever designed.
Oh, that sounds
horrible. But yeah, it was Ian Gillan for a while. But I like Dio. I was into Ronnie James Dio when he joined Black Sabbath.
Oh, I don't know that.
After Ozzy had left.
They put me off completely quite early on. I had the first and second albums, Paranoid, finished with My Woman because she could not help me with my mind. People think I'm insane just because I am. Is it crying?
Crying all the
time. Can you help me? No. Sharon, you got me a bubble machine. I'm meant to be the Prince of Darkness. And they threw one of their kids out of the house to do the TV show because the kid didn't want to be in the show. It's like, right, you're gone now then.
Yeah, off you go.
But he is an advert for Alcoholics Anonymous, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, him and so many others. So yeah, anyway, let's switch off the recording thing and say that we've had a conversation for the moment, and we'll do the same thing again soon, and we'll carry on talking. We'll carry on talking when nobody can hear us now. Okay.
Yes.
So this is by my guest Eddie Stratton, of formerly of 1 Minute Silence, but also somebody who's informed me and educated me for the last 24 years. I've learned so much from, you know, our conversations together, because you have a breadth of knowledge in areas that of which I hope to remain completely ignorant for the rest of my life. No, it really has been an enlightening experience knowing you these many years.
Yeah. Oh, jolly good, because I feel the same.
Oh, well, good.
I've learned loads from you.
Thank you.
You are encyclopedic.
Oh,
and that's great.
I didn't think it showed. Okay, thanks, Ed. Let's turn them off.